Okay, so for today's session, it's July 25th. This is the third meeting of Virtual Breath of Life. And we're going to start off today with a Q&A and video review from Dr. Kayla Begay. And the homework for this session to prepare for today was to watch Kayla's video on morphology, and that can be found on our YouTube page at AICLS. After that, I put it in an 11:45 window, but it may be shorter than that. And after that, we will put everyone into breakout sessions. So we decided to put in some goals of today's breakout session for any groups that might need a little extra guidance for what to do when you get into your breakout. So for the first 30 minutes, we would like the groups to spend some time finding the morphemes of your language, perhaps trying out the exercises that Kayla describes and working with your group linguistic partner for assistance on that. For the next half hour or so, we'd like you to talk about your final projects and making sure that everyone in the group is heard, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask for help on specific items and communicate about what you're working on and perhaps where you might need some help. And then the last 10 minutes or so, that's an opportunity to just take care of making arrangements with your linguistic partner or with each other in your groups to meet outside of the session if you need to do some catching up, or if you need to spend some extra time on the homework assignment, or to spend some extra time on your project and details around that. And at 12:55, we'll come back together for our group main session closing, and then a description of the next homework assignment. And then that's an opportunity for the groups to notify the host, Eichels, if you need additional breakout time today for your group, and then we can make that happen after the meeting is closed. Okay, what questions might there be at this time before we switch into the next phase of today's group? Okay, so I'm getting some comments in the chat. Just let me know if there's anything specific for your group. Put it in the chat. I'll be working on the groups while Kayla is talking. So I'm going to turn it over to Kayla Begay and take it from here. And I'll monitor the chat in case there are any questions that people drop in there. Thanks.
Okay. I'm happy to see everybody here today. So I'm going to go ahead and do some review and open up for some question time. And this is based off of the Morphology and the Grammar of Words presentation, a video that was uploaded to Canvas. So I'll do a little bit of review. That will be what is morphology, terms for word parts briefly. I'll go over the steps that are helpful to learning morphology from documentation, and then I'll talk about practicing that in, we have set aside time today and are encouraging folks to go ahead and do some of that in the groups. Even if you've done it before, it can be helpful to go back through and do some of that. So what is morphology? It's the study of words. Words have structure, right? And it's the study then of how words are formed, their relationships to other words, because those parts are related in other words, right? So we have the study of the parts of words, and those parts have names, but basically this is the grammar part of words. So words have grammar inside them, and in the video I showed some slides regarding this, and I had this example, and I have it here too. Nahesitiich in Wailaki, has a lot of what we call morphemes in this one word. The morpheme is the smallest meaning and sound unit that you can find in a word, for example. And in this Wailaki word, you have what's basically encoded as what could be an English sentence, right? English has not a whole lot of parts to words as compared to Wailaki. And it's not in the same order, right? So you see here, back extended, got I back breath. I got my breath extended back, but it's not the same order as English, right? So some of that is the order too. So a little bit more about word parts. This might be review for some, and we'll just go ahead and go through. A root is a morpheme, right? Remember the smallest meaning to sound unit. A root is a morpheme to which an affix can be added, and it's not further analyzable. So a root is a morpheme, just one morpheme, and things can be added to it to build the word, right? It's also often encoding the most basic meaning part of the word. So back to this example, yitch is the root here. It's in red. Yitch, breathe or breath, would be a root. A stem is any morpheme or combination of morphemes that you can add stuff to. So it's oftentimes, stem is used oftentimes to mean the most basic part that can be a combination of morphemes. So for example, this word or this root here is zis, but I never see zis without this barred L in front of it, zis. So I'm going to call that a stem because it requires two morphemes, and then from there I get all these other parts that get added to it. So basically a stem can be a root plus one morpheme or so. A prefix is an affix which is placed before the stem or root of a word. What's an affix? Well, it's anything affixing or attaching to the root or stem. So we have this example, yishzis. He finds him or it. This prefix ye is attaching to the root or excuse me, the stem here, right? And I am going to put a hyphen after it because it's attaching in that direction towards the stem. So the prefix comes before the stem. I'm going to go ahead and put a hyphen there. A suffix is an affix which is placed after the stem or root of a word. So anything coming after the stem or root. I have an example here, yishzis tech. He will find him or it. It's coming after, so I'm going to put that where that hyphen attaching back to the stem. That hyphen comes before because that morpheme's coming after, right? So we'll see this if you go through data. Sometimes you have a list of morphemes and they have hyphens. This can help differentiate some of those types. Now I want to go ahead and just note though, these are some basic morphemes, different basic morpheme types, but your language may have more language specific terms than this. For example, I know that this suffix here, teth, is encoding time, right, like future. Well, this is true of Wailaki and Hupa, but Yurok, for example, it's a separate word that encodes time, and that often comes before the verb. They're called preverbs, and that's something just sort of special to Yurok, preverbs, that term. So your language might have language-specific terms that are important to know. But some basic ones, they're here. So how do we learn morphology from documentation? So this is, again, just some review. I've listed out the steps here. I'll go ahead and go through, but these steps are also found in Canvas in a handout that you can use if you pull that from Canvas. I'll go ahead and go through these steps right now. So step one, find, excuse me, move this really quick. Find 3 to 5 words or sentences with related words. So for Wailaki, starting from the beginning, we had this documentation and it was written like so. This is a note card. Since then, we've typed up a lot, so it's easier to search through and know what and in read, let's just go ahead and say read, right? Not all of us are really good at reading. The linguistic handwriting can be quite hard. But pulling 3 or 5 words or sentences with relatedness, you can make a set here that you can compare. So this is the same data set from the video. So if there's any questions that come from that, we can go ahead and take them. But for example, I took nashtang, non-tang, nah-de-tang, and nahtang, excuse me, nahtang, which are all related here. It has to do with paddling around, right? But what's differentiated here is who's doing it. So these are verbs, but you can do this for nouns too. You can take a set of nouns, and if you find a relatedness that you want to compare, you can do that too. Other word parts, other word types, you can do this, but I find the most information in the verbs for this language. Okay. So then you write down each word or sentence like this, which would be, you have the word or sentence A, B, C, or D, translation at the bottom. So this looks like this when I do this for that set that I just pulled out, right? So we have the word or sentence at the top, some lines below it, and then the translation at the bottom. So what we're going to do from here is step 3. Look for what is the same in the words or sentences and translations. This is a little hard because I'm looking at this word and there's a lot to look at that's the same, right? In these words, related words. So how do I know which part means paddle, which part means around? Sometimes you'll need to make another list. And for me, I find that na is in other words that have this meaning around, although the main core of it is different. I carry it around, I set fire around, I roll around. So that's a good indicator to me that na means around. And then I look at other words and the core meaning seems to be at the end of the word. There's a bunch of words that say having to do with crying and che is in all of them. So that seems to be the root, right? So step 4, write the morpheme on the second line for all words that have that and include any dashes. So I've gone ahead and done this for what seems to be the root, and I'm going to go ahead and put paddle. Now I'm going to skip over something here just to say that Dene or Athabascan stems change shape a little bit. We could go through this process to figure out exactly how and why, but I'm skipping over that for now. Hopefully your language is a little less complicated, but sometimes you might have to suss that out a little bit. So I paddle, we paddle, you all paddle around, all has this tongue or a version of tongue, right? So I've written that down since we figured out that next we need to go back through, right? Repeat steps 3 through 5 until you have found all the same morphemes. So we still have this na that we can put in there. So na, around, right? So we're looking for what's the same. You write the morpheme, you write the meaning, and we've done that for na here now. There's still other things to look at though. So repeat these steps until you found all the same morphemes. In 3 and 4, I'm noticing that there's still what's an H sound, but it is written in the documentation as a backwards apostrophe here. So if I compare, oops, what's happening here is this is involving plurals, and it's not here because this is involving just one person. So I went ahead and wrote in all because that comes from this translation. We paddle around, you all paddle around. So I've written that in, done this 3, 4, 5 for all and for that apostrophe. From there, I think everything is accounted for that's the same across different words here. What's left then is to look at what's different and see if you can find some meaning. And so for here, what's left is this sh, this n, and this d. And that seems to correlate exactly with all the other parts that are left in meaning, right? I, we, you, and it seems to be in the same area in the word, which is great too. So filling that out, it seems like everything's accounted for, which is great. You can go ahead and go through these steps until everything's accounted for. And sometimes you have to, again, make another list to see if that's, or even just to check to see if your hypothesis is right for what something means. So step 8, you can go further and you can list what you figured out by morphemes. And so you can look at the form, whether it's a prefix or suffix or root, right? The meaning, let's see here, you're going to look at form, meaning, and you want to put the dashes in, right? So we have na, which is around, and then we figured out these prefixes that are person prefixes as far as who's doing what, right? And then verb roots, you'll starting wanting to list those too. And eventually what you can have if you make these lists is something like a dictionary or elements list. Because I think dictionary is a little tough for Dene languages in the sense that we're often wanting to account for the parts and not just words, right? So sometimes that's used. Okay, so step 8, and then step 9, you want to go ahead and repeat those steps for other words, other sentences, etc. So at this point, I want to go ahead and see if there's any questions that people have. You can go ahead and put that in the chat. I think I would have to exit out to view that, but maybe Carly, if there's any questions, I want to see someone can read them out for me.
I don't see any in the chat so far.
Okay. Yeah, so I presented a verb and I presented a Dene language family, Wailaki verb, but you can do this for any word category like nouns, or even like, okay, what is this? I'm not even sure. Maybe there's a category that isn't found in English, but it's found in your language and you want to figure it out. You can build lists like this to sort of figure that out, and your linguistic partners can help you do that. So if there's no questions, I'll go ahead and move forward. The practice that we suggest is to try all these steps with, you can do 2 to 3 simpler words or sentences if you're beginning, or again, you can make longer lists, maybe, more like 4 or 5 or so, and taking them and seeing and applying those steps to see if you can break down the word and account for all its parts. Now, groups of words are great to do that. You can also do sort of another way is just to pick a really long word. This is 2. Find 2 to 3 long words or sentences in your language and see if you can find all the morphemes. Like go for some really long ones. That can help to kind of practice morphology. And then more advanced, if you're someone who's gone through this process, maybe you can compose words or sentences based on the morphemes that could be a more advanced practice. And so from my understanding, what we want for folks to do this morning is to do a little bit of this practice. And this is found in Canvas as well, just so you know. There's the steps, and then there's a handout in Canvas that includes the same handout that has these steps and some practice. And also there's the video, so if that's helpful to refer back to the video, that's there too. Let's see if I had anything else. Sources used, I want to go ahead and just acknowledge these sources. Otherwise, that's what I had for just review this morning. If there's any questions, we can go ahead, and even if it's just about working with the documentation, we could do that too. And if not, we can move forward.
I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Okay, my goal was to give folks time in their breakout rooms and just give a little review. And maybe there's more questions for your LPs, so that's good. Thank you all. I can go ahead and stop share.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you, Kayla. Yeah, we'd like to give people time for the breakout sessions. So for this next segment of the Institute for today, we're going to move into the breakouts. And again, like I said at the start, we have some objectives for you to follow. Perhaps one of the coordinators, if you can drop these into the chat as well so people can see them written down as I'm talking about them. We'd like you to spend about 30 minutes to find the morphemes of your language and working with your group linguistic partner for help. Sorry, I just have some people in the waiting room who just got on. And the next 30 minutes, we would like you to talk about your final projects. And for the linguistic partners, just try to make sure that everyone in the group is heard. If you have more than 1 or 2 people, just try to make sure that everyone's interests and needs are addressed so they can work on their final projects. And then for the last 10 minutes or so, That's a good time to make some final arrangements to meet outside of the session to catch up or to work on your projects and homework. Okay, it looks like those didn't make it into the chat, so I'll write them in there. And I'm going to open up the rooms. What you'll see on your screen is an invitation to join a room to which you were assigned. And you can click on that and you'll be whisked away into your room. Just FYI, for some of the groups, members of the BOL committee might pop in to observe and to try to keep people on track. So don't be surprised if we show up in your group. So good luck, everyone, and happy meeting. We'll come back at 12:55.
Sent out sometime within the next week or two, and we'll make sure that everyone has access to that. And it would be just a quick video introducing ourselves, so everyone gets a chance to see each other before we do more sharing on projects. So thank you.
Yotwa. Chimi Newinati, I'll be praying now. O Katiptanen, we Kadeya, Hu Kahinupa Im Kun, Mawapayok. What a tie, Pe Saran, Hu Hitchkun, Kuhatiwa. Is this thy name? Chai ok o wishdi hesh, Payiki. O Katiptanen, we Kadeya. Jimmy Geek the Tiwi, Hoi Pakadam, O Adam C. Pademti, Jimmy Wakan, Wudu Pakti, Chai Oak Pakadam, O Gativdanin, We Kradeyav, Yacha Payok Hudum with the Path Zivdanin, Jimmy Hus Geek A. Tiwanat, Ko Wada Nanu Cave Nikechas, Nanu Pihanichas, Ko Wada Nanu Adadas Karu. Pa aceptawansas, pa awansas ko wada nanu hitechas karuwada. Chai fate kun kuhesh, kidi pa yiki, chas og nene ukepa funati, chai ek umahesh, nanu tevtane, chai ek umahesh, nanu adadas. Chate ko wad ethithane ya wada hesh, peshkesh ko wada pasam wado, ko wada pakemish tun wechas, karuwada. Ogthithane we kradeya, im kun nufuhishti, im kun numaharati, shwe